The royal carriages were ready to leave Innsbruck. The horses had been prepared. Servants had packed clothing, plate, devotional objects, and the visible machinery of a queen's household. But Bianca Maria Sforza could not go. Creditors were waiting. Her husband, Maximilian, had already departed. The woman who had entered his marriage carrying a dowry of 400,000 ducats was left behind with her attendants until the outstanding accounts were settled. No reliable source says Bianca was chained, locked in a debtor's cell, or formally pawned by written contract. The surviving evidence is less theatrical and more revealing. A royal household was prevented from moving because the money was not there. Bianca had once crossed the Alps as one of the most expensive brides in Europe. Her uncle had used her marriage to purchase imperial recognition of his rule over Milan. Maximilian had used her dowry to feed a court, finance wars, and support ambitions larger than his income. The money moved. The title changed hands. Bianca remained. Her rank required splendor, but she did not control the funds needed to maintain it. Her household accumulated debts in her name. Her husband traveled constantly. The marriage produced no child, and the political network that had made her valuable collapsed when her family lost Milan. Years later, Bianca would die in Innsbruck, while Maximilian was elsewhere. So how did a marriage worth 400,000 ducats turn the daughter of Milan into an isolated empress who could display royal wealth but could not command the money behind it? If you're drawn to the darker corners of history, subscribe to Grimmer History. We're on our way to 45,000 subscribers. Bianca Maria Sforza was born in 1472 into a family that had learned to turn military power into hereditary rule. The Sforzas controlled Milan, one of Renaissance Italy's richest and most strategically important states. Its workshops, merchants, fortifications, and position between the Alps and the Italian peninsula made it valuable to France, the Empire, Venice, and every ambitious ruler around it. Bianca's father was Duke Galeazzo Maria Sforza. When Bianca was 4, he was assassinated inside a Milanese church. Her elder brother, Gian Galeazzo Sforza, the lawful heir to the duchy, became duke while still a child. Their mother attempted to govern as regent, but the family's internal struggle was already beginning. Ludovico Sforza, Bianca's uncle, later known as Il Moro, gradually removed Bianca's mother from effective power and took control of both the young duke and Milan. Bianca grew up inside a court where custody could become government. Whoever controlled the child duke controlled the state. Whoever arranged the princess's marriage controlled the alliance attached to her. Bianca herself had already been used in a childhood marriage to the young Duke of Savoy. That union was never consummated, and her husband died while they were still children. She became available for another arrangement. Her family considered several matches. The question was never simply whom Bianca might prefer. The question was what her name, blood, and dowry could purchase. By the early 1490s, Ludovico faced a dangerous problem. He governed Milan, but his nephew Gian Galeazzo still possessed the lawful title. Milan was formally an imperial fief. Recognition from the King of the Romans could strengthen Ludovico's claim and turn control seized in practice into authority defended by law. The man capable of granting that recognition was Maximilian. Maximilian, King of the Romans and future emperor-elect, possessed extraordinary ambition and chronic financial weakness. He pursued wars, dynastic projects, court ceremony, and territorial expansion on resources that were rarely sufficient. He needed money. Ludovico needed legitimacy. Bianca could connect the two. The proposed marriage offered Maximilian 400,000 ducats in dowry, with jewels and ceremonial gifts increasing the total value in some accounts. The phrase, largest dowry in Europe, cannot be proved, but the settlement was enormous. For Ludovico, Bianca's marriage could purchase a ducal title. For Maximilian, the title could be sold for cash without appearing to be sold at all. The exchange would be wrapped in silk, music, church ritual, and imperial language. That elegance did not change the transaction beneath it. Two men were negotiating a woman and a state in the same bargain. The marriage was celebrated by Proxy in Milan Cathedral, on 30 of November 1493. Maximilian was not there. Another nobleman stood in his place while Bianca was joined legally to an absent husband. The city presented the ceremony as a triumph. Streets were decorated. Sforza emblems appeared across public spaces. Costly fabrics, music, jewelry, and formal processions announced that Milan had secured a connection to imperial power. Bianca wore the visible wealth of the agreement. Her heavily decorated clothing, jewels, household, and gifts were not separate from the politics. They demonstrated that the Sforza family could afford the rank it demanded. Behind the celebration sat the financial promise. 400,000 ducats, additional valuables, and the expectation that Maximilian would grant Ludovico the imperial recognition he needed. The language of marriage made the exchange respectable. Bianca was not described legally as a commodity, yet her marriageability and the wealth assigned to her were exchanged for benefits controlled by her uncle and husband. She did not negotiate the price. No record shows her choosing Maximilian. No realistic route of refusal is preserved. 5 days after the Proxy ceremony, Bianca left Milan. Chests carried clothing, jewels, devotional books, household plate, and other objects needed to establish a queenly court north of the Alps. Servants, ladies, musicians, officials, and guards traveled with her. The journey crossed the Alps in winter. Bianca arrived at Innsbruck on 22 December. Maximilian was absent. The bride, whose fortune had already become central to imperial planning, reached her husband's territory and waited nearly 3 months before the marriage was celebrated with both spouses present. The delay did not stop the money from mattering. Maximilian's government operated through constant movement and constant need. Military campaigns, political assemblies, diplomatic gifts, transport, servants, horses, and royal display consumed cash. Revenue arrived unevenly. Loans filled the gaps. Bianca entered this system with a queen's title, but without independent control over the financial structure supporting it. A royal woman was expected to maintain a court. She needed servants, clothing, transport, food, housing, gifts, arms, musicians, and ceremonial dignity. Every expense displayed rank, every failure displayed weakness. But Bianca's funds were administered within her husband's political world. The contradiction would define her marriage. She had brought immense wealth. She could not command reliable money. Maximilian and Ludovico soon obtained the benefits they wanted. Maximilian received the dowry. Ludovico received imperial recognition of his position in Milan through a process whose exact stages and dates differ among accounts. Then the bargain began to decay. Bianca's brother Gian Galeazzo died in 1494. Ludovico's enemies accused him of poisoning the young duke, but natural illness is generally considered more likely. His death nevertheless removed the lawful ruler whose existence had threatened Ludovico's claim. Ludovico could now present himself openly as duke. Bianca had helped pay for the document that made the seizure defensible, but political recognition did not protect Milan from war. And once Ludovico's power began to collapse, Bianca would discover that a princess valued for her family network could become isolated when that network disappeared. Bianca's marriage placed her inside a court built around Maximilian's movement. He traveled for war, negotiations, hunting, ceremonies, and political assemblies. The ruler was often elsewhere. His household followed when money and logistics allowed. Bianca sometimes traveled with him. Often, she did not. Her position required access to her husband. Without it, she could not reliably seek decisions, distribute patronage, or protect the people dependent on her. Letters could travel, ambassadors could report, and counselors could carry requests, but distance weakened every form of influence. Money weakened it further. Bianca maintained an Italian household within a German-speaking political world. Her servants required wages. Horses required food. Clothing had to reflect royal status. Hospitality had to be offered to visitors. Religious gifts and public alms were part of queenship. Ledgers translated dignity into debt. At some point during the 1490s, the contradiction became public in Innsbruck. The precise date is uncertain, Accounts also disagree about whether the most pressing debts belonged directly to Maximilian or had accumulated through Bianca's household expenses. The core event is accepted. Maximilian left. Bianca and her retinue remained behind because creditors demanded payment before the household could depart. The moment should not be exaggerated into physical imprisonment. No secure source places Bianca in chains or inside a debtor's cell. She remained a royal woman, surrounded by attendants. But the royal household could not move. Creditors controlled the exit more effectively than guards. Consider what the scene revealed. Bianca had been promised as the bearer of 400,000 ducats. Her marriage had helped transfer legal authority over Milan. She occupied the rank of queen. Yet when accounts went unpaid, that rank did not produce liquid money. Servants could not simply invoke her title and pass. Her presence became the guarantee that someone would eventually settle the debt. She had become collateral twice. First, her marriage secured a bargain between Ludovico and Maximilian. Then her physical presence secured unpaid bills. This was not an accident outside the marriage system. It was the logic of that system exposed. Dynastic marriage transferred wealth through a bride, but rarely gave the bride full command of it. Bianca carried money in name and ceremony. Her husband's administration gained practical control. When resources ran short, the woman associated with the fortune could still be held responsible for the visible failure. Bianca's private reaction is not recorded. We cannot invent a speech demanding release. We cannot describe tears as fact. We cannot claim she understood the event as historians now interpret it. What survives is the imbalance. Maximilian could depart. Bianca could not. The incident became even more damaging because queenship depended on public appearance. A ruler's wife was expected to embody order and abundance. Creditors stopping her household revealed disorder. It exposed the machinery behind the silk. Bianca's letters and surviving reports show that she did not live as a completely passive recluse. She corresponded with Italian courts. She received petitions. She supported household members. She attempted mediation between Maximilian and Milan. Recent scholarship has identified hundreds of letters connected to her network. That evidence matters. Older histories often repeated Maximilian's complaints that Bianca was childish, unintelligent, or interested only in amusement. Such descriptions came from a dissatisfied husband and a court that measured her against political standards he helped make impossible to meet. Bianca did attempt to act. But her influence depended on three things she could not control: access to Maximilian, dependable money, and a stable Sforza government in Milan. All three weakened. The marriage remained childless. No secure record proves repeated miscarriages or specific pregnancies. The absence of a child is certain. The medical reason is not. Childlessness reduced Bianca's value within the dynasty. Maximilian already had descendants from his first marriage. He did not need Bianca to secure the immediate succession as urgently as Ludovico needed her marriage to secure Milan. She had paid into a dynasty that could continue without her. Then France invaded Milan. Ludovico lost the duchy and was eventually captured. He died in French captivity. The political network that had negotiated Bianca's marriage collapsed. The dowry had been spent. The title Ludovico purchased had failed to save him. And Bianca remained in the empire, far from the court that had sent her, with fewer relatives capable of defending her interests. The creditor incident was not the end of her story. It was the moment the contract became visible. The richest object in the marriage had never been Bianca's possession. It had been Bianca herself. After Milan fell, Bianca's political usefulness changed. She was still a Sforza princess. She still carried the rank attached to Maximilian. Her household and correspondence remained meaningful. But she no longer stood at the center of a powerful alliance between two functioning courts. Her uncle was defeated. Her family's rule over Milan was broken. Maximilian continued pursuing campaigns and dynastic projects that carried him across his territories. Bianca increasingly lived apart from him. This separation fed the older image of an abandoned, inactive wife. The reality was more complicated. She received visitors, maintained correspondence, performed patronage, and supported displaced relatives, including Ludovico's sons. These actions did not make her secretly powerful. They show effort inside restriction. Bianca's resources remained unstable. Her officers requested money. Household expenses created conflict. The queen was expected to display magnificence because magnificence represented Maximilian's monarchy. Yet the funds required for that display were not consistently supplied. When her court spent too much, Bianca could be blamed for extravagance. When it spent too little, she risked appearing undignified. The system created failure in both directions. Maximilian's criticisms also shaped later history. He reportedly compared Bianca unfavorably with his first wife, whose memory had become idealized. The first marriage had brought territory, heirs, and emotional prestige. Bianca's marriage had brought money and an Italian legal connection that soon became entangled in war. The comparison was impossible for Bianca to win. She could not become the dead wife. She could not produce a child by command. She could not restore Milan. She could not finance Maximilian's ambitions after the dowry had been absorbed. In 1508, Maximilian proclaimed himself elected Roman emperor. Bianca therefore became empress. She was absent from the ceremony. The title represented the peak of her rank and the emptiness of its practical meaning. She could be named empress without standing beside the emperor. She could possess status without access. She could maintain a court without secure control over its funds. Bianca's health declined during her final years. Reports describe prolonged illness and physical deterioration. Later writers have proposed many causes: depression, starvation, an eating disorder, tuberculosis, or other disease. None can be established securely. One explanation blamed excessive consumption of snails. That kind of story reveals how quickly courts search for simple bodily explanations when political neglect is harder to confront. Bianca died at Innsbruck on the 31st of December 1510. She was 38. Maximilian was absent. He did not return for her funeral. Bianca was buried at Stam's Abbey rather than beside her husband. The woman who had entered the marriage with enough money to strengthen an empire left no child and no independent state to preserve her memory. The dowry was gone. Milan had fallen. The imperial marriage continued in chronicles mostly as a financial episode in Maximilian's career. But Bianca's life did not fail because she lacked value. It failed because the system extracted her value early and left her with little power over what remained. Traditional histories often judged Bianca through Maximilian. If the marriage was unhappy, Bianca must have been deficient. If she had little visible influence, she must have lacked intelligence. If the household carried debt, she must have been extravagant. If no child appeared, she had failed as a wife. This pattern turned structural weakness into personal defect. Maximilian controlled movement, access, and much of the money. His wars and projects created continual financial pressure. Yet biographies could describe him as a grand but underfunded ruler, while describing Bianca as a costly burden. The same debt became ambition in the husband and irresponsibility in the wife. An influential historical portrait presented Bianca as childlike, even playing on the floor instead of behaving with mature royal dignity. That image may reflect real criticism from her court, but it should not be treated as neutral diagnosis. Court criticism had a purpose. A queen who failed to produce heirs, stabilize an alliance, or manage a household within insufficient funding could be blamed for problems created elsewhere. Recent research has complicated that picture by recovering Bianca's correspondence and patronage. The letters do not reveal a hidden master politician. Many princely letters were drafted by secretaries, and they cannot always be read as unfiltered personal testimony. But they destroy the claim that Bianca did nothing. She communicated. She petitioned. She mediated. She supported dependents. She tried to maintain links between the empire and Italy. Her efforts were limited because the system denied her the tools that made princely action effective. History also exaggerates the creditor story in both directions. Some versions repeatedly describe Maximilian pawning Bianca to innkeepers as if she were an object physically traded from hand to hand. The precise frequency and legal form are uncertain. Other accounts soften the incident into an ordinary dispute over travel expenses. Both approaches miss the point. Bianca did not need to be chained for the episode to expose her condition. A queen whose marriage delivered a fortune was prevented from leaving because the court behind her rank could not pay. That is the fact worth remembering. How did one of Renaissance Europe's wealthiest marriage settlements create an empress who could not control her own money? Because the wealth was never designed to make Bianca independent. Ludovico attached 400,000 ducats to her marriage because he wanted imperial recognition of his rule over Milan. Maximilian accepted because he needed money. The dowry moved into male political projects, legitimacy, warfare, court expenditure, and dynastic ambition. Bianca received rank. Rank required display. Display required money. But control of that money remained elsewhere. When the funds failed, creditors could stop her household. When Milan fell, her family network could no longer defend her. When the marriage produced no child, the Habsburg future had less reason to organize itself around her. This is why the creditor incident matters. It reduced the marriage to its original logic. Bianca had entered the empire carrying financial security for others. Years later, her own presence became security for unpaid debt. She was not legally sold like an object. She was not chained. She was not proven to have died from debt or starvation. The supported truth is colder. Her marriage purchased a duchy. Her dowry financed ambitions she did not control. Her title demanded splendor without granting reliable resources. And when she died in Innsbruck, the emperor whose projects had consumed so much of the bargain was somewhere else. Milan remembered the investiture. The empire remembered the money. The ledgers remembered what remained unpaid. But Bianca Maria Sforza was the only part of the contract expected to live inside it.